I'm hoping that this has gone live. I can't actually tell, but I'm hoping it's all live. And absolutely delighted to see you all today and to welcome our speakers for today, Brian Oblinger, who's coming very early in the morning from America, and Brian can tell you what time it is in a second, and Dan Farley, who's coming from London, I think.
Yeah.
Excellent. So before we start, just want to say that this is a sort of more webinar format that has been set up. So if you have any questions, which we'd love to get, please do post them in the chat. Charlotte Lesage from Melting Spot is on the chat and she's checking that for us. But yeah, please do let us know where you're coming in from, say hi to us because we can't see your lovely faces and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much. Right, okay. So I'm hoping that everything is live and we're all good to go. So I think we should start our chat, if that's all right. So welcome, Brian and Dan. I'm delighted to have you here. I was wondering, before we start, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about your background in community, what you've been involved in the past, what you're involved in now, yeah, that'd be great. Dan, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, of course can. Thanks, Mandin. Yeah, it's really great to have everyone join. Yes, my name's Dan Farley. So I am VP of Customer Success at a company called Lunio. So we're one of the fastest growing tech businesses here in the UK currently at the moment. I've been in customer success for, actually, I don't even remember now. I think it's all just merged into one. I'd say around just over 10 years. So my background has been establishing customer success teams at businesses of a certain size and growing those to scale. I have background in community also. So as you might hear a little bit today, we're actually launching a brand new community tomorrow, I think. Yeah, tomorrow here at Lunio, which is super exciting. So it's good timing, really. But I also have had experience in launching a community. Actually, I think it was back in 2015 at an American SaaS business, which I got quite a good few learnings from as well. It didn't necessarily go that well. So yeah, hopefully I can share some of those today as well. A little bit of background on us, Lunio, just quickly plug us a little bit. So so basically we're a technology business. We remove bots, fake users and fake touch points from your entire performance marketing stack. How do we do that? Well, basically we integrate with every channel that you do any sort of paid marketing on. So Google, Meta, YouTube, whatever that is. And we then have a machine learning algorithm sits in the back end of our platform, and we watch every single click that is made to every single one of your ads, and we eliminate any invalid traffic that comes through your ads, saving you loads and loads of money. So yeah, a little bit about me, my background, and Lunio.
That's fantastic. I tell you, we need Lunio. Everyone needs Lunio by the sounds of things. It sounds great.
Everyone needs Lunio.
Oh, they do. And I'm so excited to hear that you're launching a community this week. This is perfect. We will want to pick your brains on all of that, and also that you've had some disasters, because we like to hear about challenges too. So thank you so much, Dan, and over to you, Brian.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Great to meet everybody, and thanks to everybody tuning in. I'm Brian. Let's see here. What's the intro? I've been doing community stuff since the 90s. I now meet people that were born in the 2000s, and I think to myself, wow, So yeah, I started out, working at community platform vendor. And what was great about that is like having access to like hundreds of companies' data and insights and like what they learned about it. And so I kind of took what I learned there and moved over to a couple of different companies in the data space, so Alteryx and DataRobot along the way, and helped them build out community teams and communities. And these days, doing some consulting, helping more companies figure out what is a community, why do we need it, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about here today, really, and helping them sort of succeed in this big wide world. And I think, we've definitely seen an explosion of this on the success side as companies, especially here in America, are thinking a lot more about retention than growth at the current moment. And so they're all wondering, how do I build a community to make customers happier, keep them here longer, maybe upsell them, get them to renew their contract, et cetera, all the wonderful KPIs that our friends in success care about. So that's me, and that's what I'm doing here.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian. And for everyone who's listening as well, Brian is the co-host of the fabulous In Before the Lock podcast, which if you haven't checked out already, but if you're in the community space at all, you probably have, because it's one of the best, do go and give it a listen, because it's fantastic. It's such a great resource for everyone who's looking at this space. So coming on to today's topic and today's session, we are wanting to look at building scalable customer success through communities, which is a fantastic topic. Can't wait to hear more about it. And I was wondering, just to start, if we could look at the business benefits of having a community that supports customers with their success through brands, and how that might be different from just having like the customer service team or whatever helping customers. I don't know if either of you would like to come in on that, business benefits.
Brian, go for it. You feel free to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad we started with this question, actually, because to me, this is the starting point of community in general. Is like, why are we doing it? What's the point of it? And to me, when speaking to B2B companies, for example, it's all about, how do we support the business, right? It's equal parts. How do we make customers successful? Because we know that if we do that, then our numbers will work. But at the end of the day, for us to sell this to the business and have it be a viable option for us, we have to tell those stories, right? And so, when it comes to community, it can actually have broad impact across a company, right? You can impact success, support, product marketing, DevRel, like on down the line. There's a lot of things you can do. If we zoom in specifically to success, right? It's a lot of the things I mentioned a minute ago. It's hey, can we help customers find what they're looking for faster? Can we get them better time to value? Can we, raise their NPS or their CSAT score? Can we, make sure that they're going to renew faster, or when they do renew, they buy more? Again, all of those like classic, CS kind of measures of effectiveness. And when we talk about scaled, I think that's the biggest thing here, which is as companies are being asked to do much more with less, or less with less, or, however you like it, whatever the euphemism of the day is on that, we have to shift, right, from this sort of one-to-one model. You have an assigned, CSM and that sort of thing, to, hey, can we provide self-service resources online that you can go search and find your answer and get help and, feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. So it's a lot of the same things support has been doing for a while, but we're just sort of shifting it, a little bit for the success lens.
Excellent. And Dan, what about you? So your specific situation, what were the business benefits that you were looking for or are looking for in your community?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge question, and actually everything that Brian's touched on there, like I completely agree with. I mean, there's like the benefit, I think cross company that he's mentioned specifically there, I think is absolutely huge. I think we tend to sometimes just think about the customer in this sense, but actually there's so much value outside of this. I'll come at a slightly different angle, which is basically agree with absolutely everything Brian said. Plus, if I think about our situation, so Brian's mentioned there about more and more sort of B2B SaaS businesses now all of a sudden really heavily investing in this. I guess our aim as a company, like realistically, right, is to exit the business or IPO at some point, right? That's kind of what we're trying to do. So what's really, really important there? Well, it's our company valuation, right? We want to exit our company at the highest possible valuation that we possibly can. So our shareholders and everyone at the business that has share options, they get more money. Like that's what we're trying to do. So some of the key indicators of that are things like cost of acquisition, right? And cost to serve, and having like really clear margins defined as a business that are healthy, that enable our valuation to be as high as possible when we do exit. So when I look at things like community platforms, right, there's an opportunity there for us, I guess, to do two things, right? One, to add exponential value in what we do as a product and a service for our customers, which is huge, but do it in that Scalable, which is like the in term at the moment, right? Scalable way, which ultimately means we can do more and keep our margins as a business at a really healthy level that gear towards us having a higher company valuation. That's ultimately what we are doing with this, right? So in terms of the benefits to like the business, yeah, it's been able to reach more customers, drive more value en masse without needing a customer success manager every single time we want to sort of deliver any value at all to a customer, which, right, it's not sustainable. But actually what we're really doing is we're implementing something that's, I guess, strategically pushing towards a really, really, really important event, our business, which is the valuation of our company and our cost to serve. So that's sort of the angle that I come at from as well. But yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, it's great, and that's great to hear. And it's also, thank you for being so open about it, because there's quite a lot, you know, lots of business. Oh no, we just want to like provide value, but actually just like laying it out there, it's fantastic. So thank you. And I was just wondering, so in my mind, and you might disagree with this question altogether, but I sort of feel that there's more of a trend, I guess, of people and organizations sort of being interested in the whole community space and customer success communities. And I was just wondering, do either of you have any thoughts on why it might be gaining more traction or being more of interest, or, you know, whatever, if you agree that it is, of course.
I do think, sorry, Brian, I feel like I've jumped in there.
No, go ahead.
What I will say is I do think having been doing this in and out for a good few years now, I think it's always been massively important. Like some of those huge communities out there have been running for years. Like Brian said, he's been doing this since the 90s. Like it's always been like huge. I don't know if this is true, and I don't have any evidence to support this. It's just an observation I've made. But I think since COVID, or what I noticed off of the back of that, was a development of more and more communities. So for example, I'm obviously in the customer success realm. There's always been customer success communities, but there was definitely an acceleration of those like community-based groups following COVID, because I think a lot of people, obviously we weren't able to get out, right, and like connect as much as we could do before. So I definitely saw within that kind of like 12 months prior to that period, a huge blow up of different communities, specifically in the technology and customer success realm, where people were just desperate to connect. I wonder if since then that's kind of maybe not continue to accelerate, but it's still been there. That sort of trajectory of the community feel and what's really important to us has kind of existed past that point. So I think it's always been there, but I just wonder, I don't know if since then that acceleration's happened and we're kind of, now it's become kind of bread and butter of everything that we do. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to hear Brian's take on that. You might completely disagree. But yeah, it's just an observation.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, there's plenty of room on the bandwagon, so everybody should hop on. I think, you know, what I've seen over the years is there's been sort of these, I guess we'll call them eras, right? You know, kind of the 90s through most of the 2000s was fairly focused on the support case deflection use case, right? Like that drove a lot of communities at a lot of companies. I think that COVID, you know, like kind of nearing COVID, there was definitely a lot of product communities, a lot of DevRel communities, people exploring different use cases, you know, in community, which is great. And I often say, like, great communities have more than one use case. In fact, they usually have a bunch, right? Back to the cross-functional nature. During COVID, we definitely saw an explosion of like marketing communities. And that's because, you know, everybody's marketing, they had these huge budgets and nowhere to put the money because they couldn't do field events, they couldn't do conferences. So a lot of that flowed logically into, hey, let's do it online. Let's try to meet our community online. Lately, we've definitely seen an explosion of kind of more customer success, which is again driven by, you know, sort of the issues in tech at the moment, and seeing a lot more like DevRel and developer communities. So I think that what happens is that a lot of these cycles are driven sort of naturally by whatever's happening at large in businesses. You know, I think the main thing is that we have the ability to tell the story when the time comes for whoever it is that at that moment, you know, holds the checkbook. Like we did kind of the first question here is to explain, okay, you know, you're coming from a product perspective or a marketing perspective or support or whatever it is, you know, what's the story that we tell to say, look, there, you know, here's the value of what this thing can and can't do. You know, we should be honest about what it can't do as well. Because some people think it's like a, silver bullet, and we have to sort of educate and say, hey, look, we can do a lot of things, but we can't do everything, but here's how we can help. So yeah, I think it's just sort of driven largely by the market and different things over time. And we've sort of gone through these eras, but we're definitely in the customer success era. I will say that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Fantastic. So I just see that Charlotte has put up a tally for everyone to complete, if you don't mind. If you're new to this platform, it's in discussion. I don't know if it automatically pops up, but it's on the right-hand side, discussion. If you just click on that, there is a very quick poll, if you don't mind completing that. And don't forget, please do post your questions into the chat so that we can come to those during this session as well. Thanks so much. Brilliant. Okay, so it's the era of customer success communities. Brian, as you're in this space very much and work with loads of different organizations, I was just wondering, can you share for the audience some examples of people who've done it brilliantly, who are doing it brilliantly at the moment? Anything that you can share with the audience that might, they can go and have a look at what's happening out there.
Yeah, I'll kind of answer this in two different ways. I think on one hand, we can point towards very specific examples of companies, right? So we can talk about the HubSpots of the world. We can talk about Salesforce. We can talk about my former company, Ultrix. They do this really well, and they've geared their communities to serve their audience and really deliver on this customer success value, not just for the company, but also for the user, right? And so if you visit those communities and you see what they have to offer, it becomes clear pretty quickly of like, okay, this is what a full-featured, fully built out, mature, community looks like. I also, though, want to set expectations. Like, it's one thing to say, hey, go look at, HubSpot or Salesforce. Those communities have been around, for a decade or longer. And so, kind of if you're on the call here and you're just getting started, or you're kind of at launch, like where Dan's at, I think we need to have realistic expectations about, we're not going to be where HubSpot is, tomorrow, right? Like we're going to have to build up to that. And so what I suggest actually typically for people to do is sort of ignore the companies and just go look at communities and look at the different, like dive a little deeper and look at the aspects of what they've done. Because a lot of communities will have certain things they've done really well and certain things they could be better at, right? And so it's always hard to point to one community and say they're doing everything right. It's usually these guys are doing learning really well, and these folks are doing product ideation really well, and these folks are doing an amazing user group program, or all these different strategic kind of pillars that you can build into your community. So the examples are endless, and we could certainly go through them, but I think it's just about spending time in communities and kind of understanding what they've built and how they've built it, and how the customers seem to be reacting to it, is when you get to sort of build up a library, or you go hire a consultant or an expert or a community manager or somebody who's done this a long time, and they can help you shortcut that by saying, hey, do A, B, C, and D, and skip the rest, kind of a thing.
That's great. And so, Dan, can you share with us a bit more about what you're doing in community? Like, what will the Lunio community look like? What will you offer? What's in it for customers to join? And what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. It's been busy I'd say a few weeks, but a few bumps. So basically we're on the cusp, as I said, tomorrow, of launching what we're calling Lunio Launchpad. So what we're describing this as our customer engagement hub. So ultimately, our customers are going to get access to on-demand training, direct access to our product teams, support teams, and also direct access to other Lunio customers and hundreds of different performance marketers and peers. So I guess, like, when we were first kind of exploring this, right, we talked to customers every single day, and they would always say to us, we want to know what your customer's doing. Like, what are they doing that's making them so successful? Like, what we kind of almost learn or carbon copy there. Like, we'd hear this all the time. And to be honest, every company I've ever worked at, you hear that. And there's one thing getting customers in a room together, but actually I think it opens the conversation up at the business around, like, well, how do we actually do this in a really scaling and kind of like exciting way? But also, actually, when we thought about it, it was like, well, do our customers really have enough of a connection into us as a business, right? Like they have a customer success manager, but outside of that, you know, I may log a feature request or whatever that may be, but like, how engaged am I with the product team there? How engaged am I with our marketing team? And I can actually learn from them. So there was like so many different areas. And I think it was almost a strategy for us to be able to kind of like, there's this window into Lunio and all our customers are sort of like looking through the window, but actually like we wanted just to open the window and let them in, right? Like really weird analogy. I just made that up, but you know what I'm saying. So this was all kind of about that, really adding like a brand new sort of arm to everything that we do to really put us forward as like the best in class partner, you know, not just our product, that isn't just world class, but we have this entire engagement hub that you're going to be able to get so much value and impact from. So that was really kind of what geared the decision, the drive behind it. I guess the interesting thing for us here is and Brian mentioned this at the start of the top of the call, is that obviously this is for our customers, but ultimately it's pretty much for everyone in the Lunio ecosystem, right? Like I was talking to our head of people the other day and she said to me, wow, it's incredible. Like, you know, why can't new employees at Lunio actually get tons of access from this, right? Like everything's in here. There's so much learning. And it opened up a separate conversation, which was like, well, yeah, like how do we weave Launchpad then into kind of the onboarding process for new starters at Lunio, like no matter what area of the company they're in. So it's, yeah, that's kind of how we like to see it. Like everyone in the Lunio ecosystem, the Lunioverse, as we call it, right? Like whether it's customers, whether it's people at Lunio, whether it's partners, whoever that may be, like how do we get them involved and really kind of enhance that learning and shared impact?
That sounds great. I mean, it sounds like they're really, like the business is totally on board with it, which is a whole other topic of conversation, you know, where we try and get community, you know, lots of people are sort of struggling to get community sort of the buy-in, as it were, from like the guys at the top. And I was just wondering, you know, for our audience again, who might, you know, think community is a great idea, it'd be perfect for our business. You know, I need to sell it into, you know, the C-suite, if they're not the C-suite, of course, already. I'm just wondering if you can give any, like, how was that experience for you, Dan? Like, was your CEO totally on board from the start? Did they lead it, or did you, you know, did you have to put a case forward? And if so, like, you know, what did you do?
Yeah, great question. So our CEO is great. Like we get a huge amount of autonomy here at Lunio to like really kind of like take hold of the initiatives that we think will drive real value. So he's like kind of totally on board with everything that we look to roll out. However, I'm also a great believer of like whenever you try to, or whenever you want to kind of take up initiative like this, like, yeah, you do still have to proactively put a business case forward. It has to drive value at the company. And I think the biggest thing that I think a lot of people miss out on or don't necessarily understand is you do have to show how it hits the bottom line in some way, right? Like if you have a C-suite or you have a board and this needs some form of approval, has to hit the bottom line. So going to your board and C-suite and saying, no, we want to roll this community out because it's going to have so much value to our customers. It's like, great. Yeah. I mean, we always want our customers to get more value, but you're asking us to spend X. How does that hit the bottom line? And you do need to understand that. And it goes back to some of those kind of early pieces we spoke about, which is, you know, actually we can maintain a really healthy cost to serve margin as a business as we grow. Like, what does that actually look like if we do that, right? If we grow at the same rate and our cost to serve is held at a healthy level. If you're a support team, okay, yeah, like it could be great for support. Cool. So why don't you go and put a report of the total number of support tickets you're getting today, how much time that's costing the business and therefore money. And actually, if you implemented a solution like this, actually how much more scale it would be and how much money and time you would save, right? Like, so you've got to develop, again, like what Brian said, a story which actually shows the real bottom line value of what you're doing. So obviously I put those types of things forward and try to get the rest of the business excited about it, right? Because it is really, really exciting. But yeah, we've seen from the get-go, everyone at the business, not just our CEO, but you know, we've spoken to our board about this, and they're super excited. You know, everyone in marketing, everyone in finance, everywhere, like everybody wants a piece of Launchpad. So it's been fantastic, and you do need that energy at the company. Like I've been in a situation before where you're kind of the one peddling it and telling people that they need to care about it, right? Like, you need to care about this. It's really important. But ultimately people will be like, well, how does it impact my job? Why should I care about it, right? Like, you have to get people on board, get them excited, and get them seeing the value it can drive towards their role, right? Like at the business as well. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. And Brian, have you got anything else to add? Like how have you dealt with this situation with clients?
No, I think what Dan said is exactly right. You know, it's understanding the goals of the organization, and actually Charlotte sort of answered the question in her question, which is that you have to align with other teams, right? You have to. This isn't a Dan project. This isn't a Brian project. This is a company initiative, right? And so when you look at the communities, kind of thinking back to some of the examples we gave earlier, if you look at the difference between good and great, you know, what do the great communities do really well that the good ones maybe don't or do less of? It actually is the internal alignment, you know, and gaining the buy-in, not just from, you know, whoever your boss is and the executive level, but across the entire business to say, how can community help you marketing? How can it help you support? How can it help you product? How can it help you success on down the line? And then basically building a coalition of people that are willing to do something. And when you get a bunch of different, you know, departments or groups or, you know, functional units or whatever it is contributing to community at the same time, that's how you get a Salesforce. That's how you get a HubSpot. That's how you get, you know, Ultrix. That's how you get those different examples we talked about. And it's a lot of work. Like, I think it's really important that we, you know, on these types of conversations, we're honest about it's a lot of work. It's really hard. You have to put a lot of effort in. But what I've typically found is if you do that and you do it the right way, you know, with a really compelling kind of strategy, then you can have a lot of value. But I want to caution people about thinking, you know, oh, this sounds great. I'll just throw up a community and like it'll all be good. You know, there's a lot that sort of takes place here, just like anything. You know, you wouldn't throw a conference or something without a strategy, right? And so I think that's where, you know, people that have been doing this for a long time can kind of help you understand, what does a strategy look like? What are the core things we need to do? And I saw Adam in the chat, you know, also asking about moving from like transactional to more CS, and we can answer that question. But like, these are the kinds of questions you need to answer as part of that strategy, right? Before you get started, so that you kind of have a roadmap to know where you're going and get the right engagement and alignment internally first. And then you can kind of think about how you do it on the customer side.
Yeah, great point. Love it. So yeah, let's go to Adam's question. So he's written, for people who can't see the questions, one challenge of moving from a support product community to a customer success community is shifting out of transactional interactions and deepening engagement and stickiness. Do you both have any tips for a company looking to make this shift? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I think it is a really, really great question. And I think one of the things that I learned from previously when it didn't go so well was I didn't have enough of the business really bought in to actually like really help drive this from the start. The one thing I learned is like when you launch sort of a hub like this or community, it can kind of live or die within the first month. You've got to, you know, I think a lot of the time you can switch things on, just assume, oh, this is great, customers will just use this, right? And it doesn't usually work out that way. There's got to be clear value in there, but also having different areas of the business like really shouting about it and actually contributing as well is really, really important. So like, for example, we ran like a beta period with this where we had sort of everybody at the company involved. They were given sort of tasks, like everyone open a conversation, like a piece of content, so they could kind of see the value in it. And then we had customers doing that as well in a separate group so that we could then get feedback about, you know, what's not that valuable in here, what could be really valuable that we don't have, and what is valuable. But it got everyone used to sort of using it and seeing the value firsthand. And now hopefully we're at a point that when we do launch this, we've got everyone from the business actually contributing into Launchpad and asking questions as well and creating content. So I think that's the kind of big one. If you're going to make that shift, you're going to go with something like this. It's like Brian said, it's not just this is a me project, so I'm going to roll it out and I'm going to be the only one that ever like puts anything in there. Like you've got to get everybody involved and have everyone kind of proactively creating as well, and utilize your sort of like pre-launch period to do that, right? Like just run it as a beta and get people used to it. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think, you know, shifting your mindset from cost savings, which is largely the driver of support, right, to more connection building. And so like practical ways to do that are to build programs that are specifically targeting building connection between your customers and between your customers and people in the company. So real things would be, user group programs, meetups, less kind of worrying about maybe the discussion, like question and answer, like that's going to be in every community, right? And that's important, and you should, foster that. But, learning is another one. It turns out that like a lot of companies are leveraging learning in their communities to do like more community-based learning. So for example, in past communities I've been in, we built like challenges, like weekly challenges that people participated in and, kind of banded together in certain cases. So thinking about how do we help these people build relationships? Sometimes there's like, meeting programs or mentoring programs where people sign up, they get matched to somebody, all these kinds of things that are more about kind of the human element of it. And what's really great about that, to kind of bring that back to the business value, right? Because it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to build engagement, we're going to build connection. Okay. But again, what's the business value? What we've found over the years is that when you do this successfully, the business value is that customers that feel like they're a part of something that's larger than them, or they have these deep relationships with your employees or other customers, are way more likely to renew, right? Or at least advocate for you inside their company when that time comes, because they don't want to lose their friends and their connection, right? So there's a lot of value kind of in that sort of thing as well.
I can also touch just quickly on what Brian mentioned there as well about the training element. Like that's something that we're doing with Launchpad. We noticed, obviously we have quite comprehensive training in our product with our customers, but it's always run on a one-to-one basis with someone in the customer success team. That's great, but actually a lot of time it doesn't really work for customers because, it's not instant, it's not on demand, they have to wait. And it's certainly not scalable. And one thing that we're doing with Launchpad is kind of building all of our live on-demand training into Launchpad. So ultimately what we're hoping that does is not only it just gives tons more value, our customers can self-start immediately, but it's also part of our customer journey, right? Like it's actually woven into part of that onboarding process. So getting people in there as early as possible to get the value they need at that point enables them to actually see the wider value of the community as well. So I think as well, getting it into your customer journey and woven into that, I think is really, really important. If it's not, then it kind of will always sit as this separate entity that you're telling people to go to all the time. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, definitely. So integrating it into that whole journey. Yeah, great point. And I love, you mentioned the word scalable. You both have a couple of times through our talk. I was just wondering, so the title of this talk is, it has got scalable customer communities. Success community, sorry. And I was just wondering, how are you going to, achieve scalability, Dan? And Brian, can you share any tips or best practice to make sure that you're still, achieving the impact, but getting the growth that the business is looking for?
I'm going to let Brian just share all the tips first. And then all done.
Yeah, look, I think it's about mindset and kind of philosophy, and then again, making that real in strategy. And it's, the simple version here, since we don't have, an hour to go through it, would be, you have to change your mindset from one-to-one to one-to-many, or even many-to-many, right? So when you're thinking about different programs or activities that you're building or things that you're doing, you think about, what are the things that are going to have the most impact for the most amount of people while still being as efficient as possible, right? And it's not to say that, when you launch a new community, you're going to do some unscalable things up front just to get it off the ground, and you kind of have to. But over the longer course of time, you want things that are efficient. And so you start thinking, what's the many-to-many model here? How do I build that in? And that goes back to what we said before about getting that sort of coalition of people around the company. That's your many on that side of the equation. And then how do we take everything that they know and all the knowledge that's locked in their heads and get it out onto the screen, right? So that other people can consume it. So I think it's more than anything else, it's a mindset and a philosophy, and then like putting that into action in all the various programs and things that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I suppose, in Dan's case as well, and lots of other communities I've heard about as well, is or seen, is that, the MVP, MVC, the minimum viable community to start with, and get your advocates, the smaller group of customers who are really core to, be your many as well. But yeah, sorry, Dan, come in and share what you're up to.
Yeah, actually, that point's really important, because we've also found that, like, obviously lots of content gets created, lots of discussion gets created within that MVP, but it's always there. So one fear that we always had was, launch this community and everyone goes, there's like nothing there. So then immediately it's like, there's nothing there. Like, why is anyone going to start conversation or create anything if it's all empty anyway? Like, there's no value in it. Whereas we're in a position now where that started to happen, so that when we launch it, it feels more authentic, like, for customers that are coming on board. So that MVP is so important. I think in the scalability side, it kind of, it touches on everything Brian's mentioned there. And Brian, we can learn so much from you, definitely. So thanks for sharing all of that. I think it's, again, I think as it gets, I remember this previously, like, as it starts to really take off, it's really, really important to have, like, clear process definition for everything that you have going on in that community. So, like, Brian mentioned a few things at the start there, like, you have, like, your community ideation. Okay, so customers can go in and they can open ideas about your product or about how you can improve the community, right? There's no point in launching something like that if you don't have a clear process that enables you to actually do something with those ideas and then show users of your community or customers that something's actually happening. Because if they leave something and nothing happens, they're not going to do it again, right? So it's having, like, clear process in place and having people that are accountable to certain areas of that community as well. I think it's so important. If you think you're just going to launch and do it all yourself, I don't know, maybe you could do that, but you wouldn't be doing anything else. It would just drain all of your time. So clear process definition about around the different pillars, the ideation, the support, the community groups, maybe in discussion forums or whatever they may be, your product area, and having your product team present and that side of it as well. Clear process, and also personalization as well. I think one thing we've spoken about as we scale is, like, we want it to keep that real personal human, like, approach in everything that we do. We don't want it to turn into sort of like a bit of a bot style thing, right? We want it to be really personalized and really human. Well, I guess as it scales, that becomes more and more difficult because there's just so much there. So I think that's one challenge that we will have. And it's something that I think is going to be really key when we think about scalability as well.
Yeah.
Madeline, one thing I want to say real quickly, because we haven't touched on it, and I think it's so critically important, is content, So yeah. Like, one of the things that I always coach people on when they're thinking about launching a community is content. Like, you probably want to be in the community business, but it turns out for a while you're going to be in the content business before you can be in the community business, right? Like, we often say people come for the content and stay for the community, right? Meaning they come to resolve some problem they have in their immediate, time of need. And hopefully that's the case, and we solve their problem in a scalable way and they're happy. And hopefully, and through that process, they discover, oh, there's this community here and there's a user group down the road next week and I can go, that's the kind of stuff. So I want people to understand that if you want to build a successful community and you want to get scalable and you want to do all these things we're talking about, the number one thing you can do to help yourself is build a really great and compelling content program where you're just filling this community as quickly as possible with as much high quality content as you can. And things that they can only get in the community, right? That it doesn't exist anywhere else. And if you do that and you do it really consistently over a long period of time, then you will build up a massive base of information and knowledge and, thought leadership and, like, all that kind of stuff. And that's ultimately what ends up driving a lot of communities because, I've seen the data of hundreds, maybe 1,000 communities out there, and, 80 to 85% of their traffic tends to come from Google, right? It's just people searching for things and finding the community that way. So, if you were only going to do one thing, if you only learned one thing today, it's, invest in really great content and invest in building those relationships across the company with the people who have that knowledge and make it easy for them, to write blogs, write knowledge articles, make training, get in discussions, whatever it is, because that's how you're actually going to win.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think Charlotte has just asked, actually, Dan, how are you doing that? How are you creating the content? Who's helping you?
Yeah, great question. So we're we're trying to do exactly that at the moment, create as much content as we possibly can and continue to do that. And also, as Brian mentioned, like kind of add that bit of exclusivity around it, I guess. So it's like it's authentic content, organic content we're creating only for the community. Two ways actually. So firstly, we're lucky enough here to have just an amazing content team here at Lunio. I don't know if you've seen any of the content that we put out across LinkedIn. It is really fantastic. It's so brilliantly written. Visually, it's just wonderful. And we have lots of people at the business that actually have really got something to say. So I think that is like really tap into that, like really, really valuable, and give people at the business also that kind of avenue so that you can sort of use more of that content. Also as well, we found, and I don't know if this would be the case for a lot of businesses, but we already had like tons of content on our blog at different areas that actually, you know, still super relevant. And we can reuse that content. So we could be in a situation where when we bring customers in, actually part of our content plan is to repopulate pre-existing content that's still really valuable. But it just means that we don't have to create a new piece of content every single time we need to put a piece of content in there, right? Again, it goes back to the word scalability again. So make use of the existing content that you have, and definitely reuse that in your community because it's still so valuable. And you'll probably find a lot of your customers haven't seen it before anyway, right? So probably it probably is new content to them in general. So that's something that we've been doing. But yeah, like Brian said, that's we're noticing that now the content push is huge at the start, and it's something that we're really kind of doubling down on.
Well, I mean, most companies don't have a content problem in terms of volume. They have a problem in terms of where is it and does anybody know what it is and how to get to it and that sort of thing. And so I think, you know, one real benefit of communities, you can unify that, right? You can bring all that content into a single place with a single search where people can interact with it. And then it cross-pollinates, right? If you have the recommendation widgets on your community, what's really great is if someone's reading a discussion, for example, then in the recommendations, they might see, here's a blog post that you might be interested in. Here's a learning module. Here's, you know, and so in that way, like if you can bring it all together, it sort of helps you amplify things. And that's part of the story, by the way, when you go to our friends in marketing and you say, hey, we're going to take a bunch of your blogs and we're going to put it on community. They're a little uneasy about that, right? Because they're like, hey, that's our stuff. It's on the .com, you know, whatever. And so you tell them this story about, hey, look, you know, actually, if everything's together or linked or recommended or whatever, then we all have a better shot of people finding this. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to make it easier for customers to find what they need. So just as an example of like that cross-functional, you know, conversation that you need to have to sort of get to a better place to serve the customer.
That's great. And in actual fact, we were having a conversation with Jorge Tellez from Ravello in Mexico yesterday on the CLG Summit. And he has developed a whole content community because unfortunately his marketing team were laid off. And so they decided to use their, or not use their community, but ask their community to produce the content for them, like basically content that was relevant and of value to the customers. And he is seeing absolutely amazing results, as you know, off the back of it. He's now got 250 writers who are like producing stuff for him. They're all community led. It's amazing. Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, I'm aware that we're near the end of time, so I think we should probably wrap up. But thank you so much, Dan and Brian, for joining us today. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've hugely enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone else on the call has as well. My takeaways from it were, some of them anyway, lots there, but, you know, start small and grow. Don't think you have to have a finished product. Definitely get internal alignment before you, you know, launch anything. Don't think so much about cost saving, but think about connection. And then going back to the fact that you're going to start being a content business before you become a community. So focus on the content. But I don't know if I've missed anything else that you would like to add.
No, I think it's perfect. Thanks for having me, and you know, hopefully see everybody out there.
Yeah, brilliant. And best of luck, Dan, with your community. We look forward to watching it grow.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Go get them, Dan.
Exactly. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully see you all soon. Bye.
Very good. See ya.
Bye.